Baby, it's horse beef. What's going on, everybody? Bringing you another tier list video. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so I thought I would bring it back a little bit and just rank all of the fraud checks from this year. And pretty much what I'm talking about are fighters losing their O's, because there have been a whole lot of undefeated fighters who have lost their O this year and been quote-unquote fraud checked. And these are my specific tiers. We have fraud, which is just outright frauds, in my opinion, partially fraudulent. Fighters who, I guess depending on the circumstances of their fraud checking, if they were fraud checked at the highest level, are they exactly a fraud? Let's see, right? But I think a lot of that has to do with how much they were hyped, right? Because some fighters are just hyped up way more than they deserve to be just based on the fact that they have an undefeated record but haven't really displayed a high level skill set. They meet the UFC level and then they get knocked down a peg. Is that a fraud checking? I'm not necessarily sure. And I haven't even really put much thought into this, but let's just get into it right now. And then, of course, before we get into it, lost but not exposed. So that's just for fighters who put up a good scrap despite losing, right? And let's just get into it right now. We have Austin Bashi, who lost to Christian Rodriguez, who is known for taking O's away from young fighters. And he's extremely young, right? So that's why I struggle to put him in fraud, right? He's not an outright fraud. The guy is very, very young. And as long as he's willing to learn, as long as he has a positive mindset off the back of his first career loss, then I think he could improve tenfold. But he did look quite poor on the feet and wasn't really able to impose his will on the ground either. I feel like he did get exposed a bit, but he's so young to the point where, like I said, as long as he takes this loss as a learning experience, I believe that he can come back and put some wins together. At his age, it's hard to write these dudes off, but I'll put him in partially fraudulent. Then we have Shara Bullet. I'm going to stick him right in fraud because this dude is a dynamic striker. He's supposed to be one of the best strikers at middleweight right now, and he goes up against a very one-dimensional striker in MVP. And I know I'll get some shit for saying that, but I honestly don't rate MVP that highly. I've never understood the hype around him. I really don't, man. He just sits back and he spams blitzes, right? Blitz right hands, throws a couple of spinning elbows in there, a couple of flying knees every now and then. He doesn't really throw anything else. I'm not that impressed. And Shara Bullet, his dynamic striking style, was completely shut down. He was batting like 0% in this fight. I'm not even sure if he landed a significant strike. Did he land a significant strike? I'm not too sure he did. So if you're getting completely shut down like that by MVP, in my opinion, you're a fraud, especially when you're a striker, right? When you're a striker, you're getting shut down by MVP. You're getting shut down by a fucking blitz right hand. Then you're a fraud, man. Shara Bullet, fraudulent piece of shit, jumps people in shopping malls. So he's a bitch anyway. He's just a fraud human. He's a fucking fraud fighter. Let's move on. Clayton Carpenter. See, the issue with him is I don't actually think that he was ever as good as he was touted to be, but he wasn't really touted as a next title challenger maybe, but he is quite young as well. But I think he showed a pretty good skill set in his last fight. I think he did. He went up against a very, very tough test. Tagir Ulanbekov is no joke whatsoever. He's very big for the weight class as well. So I would say he lost, but he wasn't exposed. I think it made sense for him to lose that fight against Ulanbekov. And it was a pretty decent fight at the end of the day. It's not like Carpenter got completely walked. I would say lost, but not exposed for Clayton Carpenter. Then we have Payton Talbot. Now, listen, he got fraud checked because Payton Talbot was being touted in a similar way to what we saw with Sean O'Malley. He was essentially being built up as the next Sean O'Malley. And unfortunately, you just cannot be called the next Sean O'Malley if you're getting dog walked by Barcelos, dude. Barcelos. Did pretty well on the feet. Payton Talbot had no moments really at all in that fight until the third round. I think he looked pretty good early in the first, but as soon as Barcelos got him to the ground, he looked like a fish out of water. Looked completely lost, and the man was exposed on the ground. I don't know. And after the fight too, he looked completely dejected. I'm not too sure. That's the kind of loss, at least the way that it looked to me visually, the way that he took the loss in the moment. It's the type of loss that I can see causing a spiral in Payton Talbot's career, man. I can see him going downhill from here. But I'm not exactly praying on his downfall because he is kind of a fun fighter to watch. He is. Stylistically, he is a fun fighter to watch. So I hope he can come back, maybe get in the mix a little bit. But honestly speaking, I don't know if he has that mentality. Let's just see how things go from here, though. Then we get Juicebox, and I'm sticking him right here, man. He lost, but this man was not exposed whatsoever. He's almost like the new version of DDP, and the man looked so goofy. He looked slow. And I loved watching him just crash into Alonzo Menafield, clinching him up, knees to the body, elbows in the clinch. The man is just such a scrappy fighter. He displayed such a crazy chin as well, such crazy toughness. And even though he looked completely gassed at a certain point in this fight, dude, he was still coming forward, eating shots on the chin, and arguably deserved to fucking win this fight, man. I actually think that Julius Walker, motherfucking Juicebox, was robbed here. He was robbed. In my personal opinion, I think he should have been given the decision there. He did enough to win for me. And yeah, man, I think he shouldn't even have a loss. He shouldn't even be considered a fraud-checked fighter. He also took the fight on short notice, if I remember correctly, and he has very little experience in MMA to begin with. So I think the fact that he's so inexperienced and he came in there and performed that well against Alonzo Menafield, who's been around for quite a while, he's a bit of a veteran at this point. Julius Walker is hilarious, and he is not a fraud. This man is a goofy goober in the same vein of a DDP or a Yuri Prohazka or a RDR. And I love Juicebox. He's going to go far in the sport. Probably not, but I hope he does. And this man is not a fraud. Fuck you if you think so. Let me get Luis Gerule. Now, I don't really know. I'll probably say like partially fraudulent because like I didn't even know who this guy was beforehand. He was just another miscellaneous undefeated fighter who came in. And I guess Dana White was hoping that he would get the win. But Ode Osborne, pretty bad record in the UFC. But he is quite underrated if you watch his fight against Christian Rodriguez or his last fight against Luis Gerule. Right? The man looks pretty good in there. And he's quite underrated. His record doesn't exactly tell the whole story. So he did get beaten by a pretty good fighter. But I think we just saw that Luis Gerule is just not UFC caliber, maybe. And yeah, that's it. He's just another guy with a, you could say, padded record from the regional scene, and just figured out that he wasn't UFC caliber. And that it's as simple as that, man. Luis Gerule, yeah, partially fraudulent, I would say. Then we get Ray Surai, and I'm going to stick him right in fraud because he was almost seen as like the next Tatsuro Taira, or some people were saying he's even better than Tatsuro Taira, maybe on the feet as well. But what we saw against Joshua Van, that this dude looked completely lost in that fight. Whenever he couldn't get the fight to the ground, whenever he failed to take down on the feet, he looked scared to get hit. He looked scared. He looked scared to engage with Joshua Van. And that's it, dude. He's very creative. I enjoy Ray Surai. I've even spoken about him in the past as a dark horse in the flyweight division. But after what I saw against Joshua Van, I just wasn't impressed, dude. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of fight in him. He seems to like to avoid fighting altogether. He just wants to roll. So, yeah, man, got completely exposed in one area of the game. Looked like a fish out of water. And for that reason, Ray Surai, in my opinion, is a fraud. And then we get Danny Barlow, left hand to God, one of the coolest nicknames in the game. But the man got put out by a left hand, I believe, from Sam Patterson, who's not even a knockout artist to begin with. But was Danny Barlow really seen as a massive prospect to begin with, man? Maybe just because the undefeated record, but I think other than that, he really showed like not a whole lot of title potential to begin with. So, I mean, I was never really convinced by Barlow, so I'll say he was partially fraud checked. I would say partially fraud checked, mostly because he got put out by a left hand when his nickname is Left Hand to God, and it also happened to be against Sam Patterson, who is not a knockout artist, more of a submission artist to begin with, and he got slapped by him, man. Yeah, dude. Partially fraudulent. Let me get Daniel Marcos. Now, I'm not too sure where to put him exactly because I'm in the middle of partially fraudulent and lost but not exposed. But Montel Jackson, I feel like, was pretty underrated to begin with going into that fight. I think he was being written off too much, including by people like myself. I thought Daniel Marcos would beat him, but I think he just reached the level that he was not quite at yet against Montel Jackson. Like I said, the very much underrated Montel Jackson. Oh, shit, man. I don't know. He did get shut down pretty handily. Did he get exposed, though? Maybe. Or maybe Montel Jackson is just that good, right? So I'm not too sure where to put Daniel Marcos because I'm not too sure if he was really seen as much of a title contender to begin with, really. Like I said, guys, it's just really down to the fact that he had an undefeated record. That's really what it comes down to with some of these guys. You can watch them. The eye test tells you everything you need to know about them, whether they can become a champion or not. I never really saw it in Daniel Marcos. So it's hard to say that he's a complete fraud because I don't think that he was at that level to begin with or really was ever that good to begin with. So I would say partially fraudulent for Daniel Marcos. And then we have Jean Matsumoto, who I still think, despite losing to Rob Font, is a massive, massive prospect. He showed a great skill set. He is a very technical striker. He is good on the ground. He showed a very well-rounded skill set against one of the best gatekeepers in the UFC. Rob Font is a very tough litmus test, and some people thought that he was robbed against Rob Font. I actually thought that Rob Font deserved to win the fight. I was happy to see him win the fight, but Jean Matsumoto, not exposed whatsoever. The man was tough. He showed good cardio, great toughness, very, very tough dude, honestly, and just a great, well-rounded skill set, technical in all areas, and I was impressed with Jean Matsumoto despite the loss. So I'm going to say that he lost, but he was not exposed whatsoever. And then we have Josias Musasa, who I have a hard time putting under fraud because I didn't see the hype to begin with. Young dude, inexperienced, like pretty inexperienced as well, just an undefeated record, like I keep saying. Went up against Carlos Vera, and I think maybe we were just unaware of how good Carlos Vera actually was, because he's like the upgraded version of Ryan Hall out there. Looked really good on the feet and just caught him with a beautiful head kick, dropped him, choked him out. It was just a masterful performance from Carlos Vera, and I think we just saw that Josias Musasa is just maybe not at the UFC level. Yeah, but it's not like he got completely destroyed up until the finish, but Carlos Vera looked damn good in there. But maybe it was Musasa making him look good, potentially, right? Carlos Vera is getting up there in age as well. So, I don't know. I'm not too sure. How do you guys classify this? But for me, I would say that he was partially fraud checked. Then we have Bo Nickel, and I'm sticking him right in fraud. And I know it's a tough world we live in, right? So to classify Bo Nickel as a fraud, despite the fact that, like I've been saying about some other fighters on this list, not the craziest records in the world, just simply undefeated, relatively inexperienced in the game. But Bo Nickel, right, by all accounts, based on his own accounts, right, of his own skill set, Dana White, everybody just blowing this dude, blowing his skill set out of proportion, acting like he is some world beater. And like I said, the one to go up against Khamzat Chimaev. Bo Nickel was already building up that fight with Khamzat Chimaev, like before he had even gone up against Paul Craig, dude, and he was already fraud checked against Paul Craig, so it was obvious what was going to happen to him against RDR. But then you go and you get TKO'd by RDR. You get TKO'd by him. Like, RDR is not a knockout guy. He really isn't. He thrives on the ground. And he just went out there, went Dutch kickboxer mode on Bo Nickel, broke him down, and just beat him in every way possible. Just completely defeated this man. So I'm going to say, based on the title aspirations, based on the potential, the hype surrounding Bo Nickel, I would say this is 100% unequivocally a fraud checking. That loss to RDR, I would say the method of how he lost as well adds to it, getting TKO'd by RDR in the second round. It's a terrible look, but RDR is just, he's on a title charge. He's the main character. So on one hand, there's no shame in losing to the main character, but Bo Nickel believed that he was the main character, and he found out that he in fact was not. So he is a fraud. Then we get in DR Nurza guy, and the only reason why I'm sticking him up here at fraud is because he missed weight on his UFC debut against Brenson Ribeiro and got completely beat up by him, dropped, hurt in the first round, and then again hurt in the second round and tapped out. Listen, if he didn't miss the weight, then I probably would have put him at partially fraudulent because it was only his first fight in the UFC, but you missed weight and still got dog walked like that, my friend. You are a fraud as far as I'm concerned. Then we get Mick Parkin. Now I think what we found out with Mick Parkin is that he is just another slightly technical fat heavyweight. He got beat by Tabora. Wasn't the most embarrassing loss of all time at all, but I think we just saw that Mick Parkin, he's just another tubby heavyweight, and that's it, man. That's all. Like, partially fraudulent, I guess. Like, anyone who throws technically proficient punches is hyped up as the next big heavyweight, but no, Mick Parkin is not another Tom Aspinall. He's just potentially another Derek Lewis or something, like, you know what I mean, or another Tai Tuivasa potentially. I don't know. Maybe Mick Parkin will end up becoming a champion at some point in the future, but I would say partially fraudulent, dude. And man, Marcin Tybura is just such a fucking formidable gatekeeper at heavyweight. It's crazy. And then we get Rinya Nakamura, and I hate to put him up here. I hate to put Rinya Nakamura up here because he did go up against Gaffarov, and Gaffarov is no joke. He isn't. But Rinya Nakamura, I just thought that he was so much better than he looked on that night, dude. He actually looked a bit like Bo Nickel did against Paul Craig or against RDR, just slinging naked overhands, no setup, and getting popped, man, getting dropped and hurt over and over and over again, and just really not able to get anything off on Gaffarov. He did have a couple of moments, I think, in the third round when he was really pushing for it, but it was just blind pressure, blind overhands, and just didn't use any of his wrestling, right? And I'm not too sure. Like, you could say it was down to the game plan, but I think that takes a lot away from Gaffarov. And I don't know, dude, but I think that maybe Rinny Nakamura, because I would say that the only reason why he's a fraud is because he actually was being touted as a future title challenger, by myself included. I was overrating this guy. I was overhyping this guy. I thought that he had potential because he looked like he had great boxing, great wrestling to go along with it, looked physically strong, but he just looked like a shell of what I remember him being against Gaffarov. But maybe it's because Gaffarov is that good. Having said that, I'm still keeping Rinny Nakamura in fraud because he did look pretty bad on that night. Then we get Cody Steel. Now, I don't think this guy was ever going to be anything too special in the sport, but the man proved himself to be a beast, right? And I'm going to put him in lost but not exposed, and that's just what it is, dude. He showed that he's a scrapper. He's a tough dude. He has a 1 on the record now. It is what it is. I still think he'll come out there and look like that every single fight. I just think that he was just another undefeated fighter who just hadn't met that UFC caliber yet. But he showed that he can hang, right? He can still hang, and he did hang with Rongju despite getting pieced up a bit, and it was a great fight, man. So I don't want to say that Cody Steel was like totally exposed in any way, but it's just relative to the expectations put on him. I don't think he was ever going to fight for a title in the first place. Then we get Tatiana Suarez, and she was fraud checked. I would say you could honestly just put that down to the fact that she's going up against Weili Zhang, and for that reason, I'm only going to put her at partially fraudulent because she went up against Weili Zhang, and I think Weili Zhang is just light years ahead of all of these other ladies, and for that reason, like it's hard to say that anyone who loses to Weili Zhang is a fraud, right? Because Tatiana Suarez has only lost to Weili Zhang. She lost to the champion, the dominant champion, and there's not exactly much shame in that. So Tatiana Suarez, even though she looked pretty bad on the feet and really wasn't even able to impose her will on the ground, which is where she's supposed to be the best in the world, right? So you could say she's a fraud, but I'm going to say partially fraudulent there. Then we get Colby Thickness, and the reason why I'll put him down here, lost but not exposed, is because it was his first fight in the UFC against Alexander Topuria, right, who looked great. He looked like just a shorter, stockier version, even stockier version of Ilia Topuria, throwing big overhands. But like Alexander Topuria is clearly very, very skilled, and Colby actually made it quite a tough fight. Now, I'm not saying that Colby Thickness is going to fight for a belt at some point in his career, because I just simply don't think that he ever will. I think he looks like a prelim fighter. He does. He looks like a prelim fighter. He lost the O. Big deal. Like, the man was undefeated because he was fighting on the regional scene. It's as simple as that. Alexander Topuria looked really good. Now he's seen as a prospect. So the fact that Colby Thickness did give him such a tough fight, I think, boosts him up this list a little bit. Or I guess pushes him down the list technically, because it's better to be down on the list for these guys. But then we get the last but not least, right? The main event here. We have Umar Nagamemedov. Now, I made a lot of videos shitting all over this dude's face, just roasting him and roasting his fans mostly, right? Not really him. And I would love it to put him in fraud, right? I would love to. But at the end of the day, if you want to put Umar Nagamemedov in fraud because of what Merab did to him, then you have to list all of Merab's victims in fraud as well, right? Because what happened to Umar is what happens to everybody. So I guess you could say lost but not exposed, right? But the thing is that Umar was talking crazy. Everyone was talking crazy about Umar Nagamemedov just going to go in there and dog walk Merab. Apparently Merab was ducking this dude, everything. And that plays a huge hand in where I rank Umar Nagamemedov here. Otherwise, I probably would have put him at lost but not exposed, but he was a favorite. He was a favorite, right? Which to me is just so disrespectful to Merab, considering who he had to go through to get to the belt, and then compare that to who Umar had to go through to get to the belt. Like, Bezkat, yeah, it's a great victory, and it does age pretty well, I guess, because he just knocked out Katona. But then you get pushed all the way up the rankings to Corey Sandhagen, who is number 1 ranked, and you have a pretty close competitive fight with him. You go 5 rounds. But like I said, compare that to who Merab had to go through. I think the fact that Umar was really being held up as the guy to just go out there and dog walk Merab, make it easy when Peter Yan couldn't do it, and compare Peter Yan and Umar Nagamemedov, match them up stylistically, I think Peter Yan goes and dog walks Umar. I do. I think he dog walks Umar. So the fact that people were really that delusional about Umar's skill set, including himself, including his team, everyone around him, everyone was delusional. Now, you know what? The more I'm talking about it, the more I believe that Umar was just outright fraud checked because of the disrespect, because of the accusations of ducking, like accusing the champion Merab, right? The man who's never pulled out of a fight, who's beaten everyone put in front of him, who just went through fucking, like, if I remember correctly, like prime Marlon Moraes, maybe not prime Marlon Moraes, but like I think right after his prime, or after he had lost to Cejudo, I believe it was, Peter Yan, Jose Aldo, remind me of Henry Cejudo. Holy shit, dude, just a GOAT run of wins, and Sean O'Malley before that, right, to win the belt. Like truly a GOAT run of wins. And Umar fans, and himself included, were that delusional still that he was going to make it look easy. So I think the fact that he gassed just like everyone else, and he proved that he is in fact not different than any one of Merab's opponents, leads me to the conclusion that Umar Nagamemedov was in fact fraud checked, and the man's a fraud. I'm not saying that he can't come back. Obviously, he's really good, and he will come back and win some fights, 100%. But considering how he was being built up, right, held on this massive pedestal, no, the dude was fraud checked. But that does conclude my tier list of 2025 fraud checks, right? So far, I thought I would do this since we are pretty much halfway through the year now, and I will do this, of course, at the end of the year, because I can only assume that there will be more fraud checks, just considering what this year has brought so far and how many padded undefeated records are being brought into the UFC. We are bound to get some more fraud checks coming up pretty soon. So like I said, I will bring you another one at the end of this year, as long as I don't get banned off YouTube by that point. But anyway, guys, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.